Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the KETIV Autodesk Virtual Academy. And as usual, I'm Nigel and host, and I guess I'm presenting today, so it's a little bit of a change. If you guys are wondering who I have next to me, originally supposed to be Jorge Fernandez. This is obviously not Jorge Fernandez. This is Jose, who's an application engineer here. He's done a couple of AVAs for us, and he'll be helping me with presentation, moderating some questions, and answering them as well. So if you do have any questions on that note, feel free to go ahead and type them into the chat box as you usually do every week, and we'll be able to answer them either during the session if applicable or during the dedicated Q&A session at the end. Let's start jumping into this. So this week we're starting a new series, I guess you could call them, of webcasts called Inventor Fundamentals, with a emphasis on the fun. Pretty much we're going to start doing a couple of these every couple of weeks, which is kind of, starting from, just essential things, definitely, that you need to know about Inventor and to get, the most out of it. So today we're going to start with project files, which I believe is, one of the things you need to configure first when starting to use Inventor in the first place. I know that pretty much everyone on this call looks like is already an Inventor user, just based on my knowledge of some of you guys. Definitely project files are something that's very overlooked, whether it's you and your team not necessarily using the same project file if it's vaulted, or sometimes you get error messages that when you're saving files, like, this doesn't fall in your project. Like, what does that even mean? Those are a couple of things that we're going to be answering today. So with that, let's start getting into the presentation. And Jose, if you see any questions, please let me know, and we can start moving in answering those. So with project files, first questions, what are they? So if I miss anything here, Jose, just feel free to chime in. So project files are pretty much XML files, if you're familiar with those. They have just, the file ending extension of IPJ. They're Inventor files, not necessarily Inventor CAD files, but they're files that Inventor uses to maintain your workspace and kind of keep all of your files within one project all together. So with that, we're going to move on to texting. Why should you care? Why should you care? Well, sometimes, not sometimes, I think Jose can speak to this as well, but a lot of times we get lifeline calls here from our customers that get error messages that relate to, like, things that aren't necessarily working properly, whether or not that's, I can't find my file, I need to find all these linkages. That's pretty much the most common thing. And it's like, I can't find this file that my assembly is referencing to. Well, that can all be solved by having, your proper project file locations and your workspace. A lot of times people accidentally save files outside of their project file workspace. When their assembly is looking for the file, it can't find it. We'll go over that shortly. And what do you need to know? A couple important things here: single user projects versus vault projects. We're going to go over that. That's really important. How to set up a project file. When's the best time to use a new project file, or even if you want to use a new project file. Some people, they use a single project file for everything. It really depends on your situation. Those are a couple things that we're going to go over. So definition and usages. Project files help organize all files associated within a single project. So for example, I have a project file for every one of my different projects. And every file that's associated with each one of those files within a single project file, not multiple, so it's easy to find. I'll show you how the project file looks for everything. 2, keep your data in a single, well-structured workspace, kind of reiterating the same thing. And then 3, single user versus vault projects. Single user projects don't necessarily mean, you work by yourself, you don't work with the team. Single user project, pretty much I'd like to call this the non-vault project. Anyone who's not using vault, you use a quote-unquote a single user project. Whereas if you are using vault, it's definitely you kind of have to use a vault project.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into a quick demonstration real quick. So Inventor 2017 looks pretty much the same as everything that I'm sure you all are using or maybe haven't used yet. So when you open your Inventor, you come into this home window here, and there are a lot of things. Most people, they like open their recent documents here at the bottom, or they open a file here, or they even just jump into their vault and open a file from Vault if you're already using that. Thing that gets overlooked a lot of times is the project file that's active. This happens a lot with people who are like, I can't open my Vault stuff. It's like, why? Well, your project file's not a Vault project file.
And that actually links to some of the issues that we see here with the Vault tab in Inventor. We'll get calls saying, I can't log in or check out files through Inventor. And usually when we go in, one of the first things we check is the project file.
Yeah, and if it's not set to a Vault project, then obviously you're not getting Vault files. So that's a big one. That comes, I want to say that one comes maybe once a week, maybe.
Yeah.
It's definitely very common. So start with projects. Obviously, all your projects lie here on this tab on the right side. But we're going to go ahead and jump into the project dialog up here in the left upper corner. So here is a list of all of my project files. This is the project editor. All of my different project file names are in here, and there's some details about each project. So what we're going to do is when you get Inventor, I believe you get 3 project files at the beginning. When you do it, you get this default project, and then you get 2 more. Sometimes when I jump on customers' computers, for the most part, a lot of people are using default, or maybe they've already configured one for their company, or someone at their company's configured one that everyone uses. But a lot of times I still see people using the default project file, and definitely you want to leverage all of the tools that you have available to you, and project file is definitely one of them. So when you do use like your default project, all of your stuff gets put in a single workspace. It kind of gets a little messy depending on how much stuff you have. So we're going to start here with a new project file. And then, like I said earlier, there are 2 kinds of projects. You have your single user projects, and you have your Vault projects. Essentially, like just to reiterate, your single user project is not mean that you're working alone, you're not working with colleagues. It just means you're not using Vault. So we're gonna jump through the single user project real quick. Next, we'll go ahead and make this project name, let's see, AVA. Sure, we'll just make the project name AVA. Jump to the next dialog box. Here we select your libraries. So here I'm just going to use my particular library. I'm just going to send this one over. I don't really need any of this stuff for this particular project. My images, my electrical library, I don't really need those. So I'm going to send this over, and then I'm going to hit this finish button. It's going to give me this message here that says, the project path you've entered does not exist. Should it be created? If you want to create the new project, yes, you want to create this. So as you can see, it got added here, and here's my AVA project, and it shows me where the project location is. You can even just take this and put it in your Windows Explorer, and it'll be able to find where this lies. So with that, we're going to jump into this bottom half here, which is where you kind of configure the project file. Here's my project. Type is single user project, so I'm not using Vault right now. I'll show you how, if you are using Vault, to do the same thing. Location, this is where the file location is. So if you follow this on the machine, you're going to get to where the project file located, which is that IPJ file, which is I believe it's the orange icon. I don't remember. Included file. So this is really important if you want to include another project file within the search path of this project file. Say, for example, you're doing another project that's kind of an extension of another project. You need a bunch of stuff from one, an older one maybe, or just another one in general. You can include that project file here, and that'll work too. Styles library, this is really important. Use style library, read only. So what this means is the styles library is, as it says, read only. Can't really make edits to it. This is probably the most important thing about editing your styles. If you're going to do that, obviously you're going to want to right-click this guy and go to read write. A lot of times, a lot of people and a lot of our customers, they use the read write for maybe an admin on their team who will do all of the editing. And then when they share this, they'll make it read-only so that your users don't necessarily get to edit your styles library, kind of mess with the continuity between you and all of your colleagues. Appearance libraries, it's pretty self-explanatory. Your appearance libraries, so your hatches, your materials, appearances, all of those, like I believe they're bump files.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those all lie here. They pretty much tell you what your stuff looks like. That's all there. Materials libraries. Obviously, I have the regular Inventor materials library here. And I think the most important thing here is this Workspace tab. So if you jump here into Workspace, this tells you where your workspace is located. So usually your workspace is located in the same place as your project file or a folder below. Obviously you can change it if you wanted to, say, put your workspace on an external drive if you were worried about space. And this is where you do that. So if you really wanted to explore here, I could explore here and say I wanted to, I'm actually networked, I could actually put my workspace on Jose's computer if I wanted to. Or I could watch Jurassic World. Let's see what else we got here. More libraries. So this is a little bit different. This points to my vaulted libraries. Folder options we have down here. This is really important too. So this relates to your vault. Not your vault. Sorry, I have vault on my mind right now. Of your Inventor locations for files. So if you go into your Inventor application options, you can set where a lot of this stuff is, your design data, your templates, your content center files. And you can override that using your projects. So say, for example, like 90 times out of 100, you're going to be using whatever's in your application options, where it's like, okay, my design data lies here, my templates lie here, and my content center lies here. If you want to, say, for example, for one project, you want to use different content center files that only relate to that one project, you can send them somewhere else through here. Or say, for example, I don't know, maybe you want to use an older releases content center files or something. You can send that all here. It's all customizable, all works to you in that sense. So options, also pretty important. Looks like Jose's got something here real quick.
So we got a question here from Lloyd Hendricks. He's asking if we could explain exactly what the workspace is and what's stored there.
Yeah, sure, Lloyd. Jose, do you mind?
Yeah. So by defining workspace, it's where your files are going to be saved that you're using for this project. So let's say you have models or assemblies that you only want to use for a certain project. This folder structure or this folder path is where you can find them, and you can keep them separate from any other files that you might be working with. It's where Inventor will look when you try to open up a file by default.
Yep, and I'll show that here in a little bit, where my Inventor is going to look for a file based on. I'll show you how it looks for a file based on your workspace that you have located in your project file. So under options, this is something I see not used very often. Old versions to keep on save, and it gives you a number to put in here. So what this does is it keeps your old versions only based on the number that you put in this variable here. So if you want to edit this and you want to make this number not 1, right now it says 1. So it's going to keep all the current version and then one before that in your workspace. And there's a folder for that. If you change this to state 2, you'll have your current version and you'll have 2 previous versions. If you set it to -1, it keeps everything. Just to note that if you do this, and you do set it to something like -1, you're going to fill your hard drive space pretty quickly. These CAD files aren't necessarily large. Your assemblies are maybe, I don't know, depending on how large it is, they could be anywhere between 50, 100, more than that megs. And if you're saving multiple versions of that, you're going to start getting a ton. Using unique file names, yes, obviously. 99% of the time, I think you want to maintain unique file names. You don't want things to be like file A and file A, but they're actually 2 different things. It's definitely not what you want. Name, shortcut, owner, release ID. These are used kind of just to maintain your information. This is the name and the shortcuts of the project files, and then down here you can edit these to pretty much whatever you want. So I can make the owner of this, say for example, I didn't make this, Jose did, so whatever. So that's that. I'll go ahead and show you real quick how the workspace, yes, I want to save the changes to my project. So say for example, I have this AVA project open, and I want to open a file. What's going to happen is it's going to default to this workspace. And this workspace under the AVA folder is where I set it to in my project file. So I don't, if this answers your question, Lloyd, all of the files that you save when you have this project open are going to default to want to save in this location. Whether or not you want to add more folders here, that maybe say something along the lines of like assemblies, and then another one with parts, another one with drawings. You can do that. So it looks like here we got another question from Chi. What is the difference between workspaces and local files? So all of these files do lie on my local workstation. So the workspace is just where you want to store all of your stuff. You can choose to store all of it locally on your machine. Sometimes you want to store your workspace on maybe a network drive if it's shared with somebody. And sometimes, when you're using vaulted projects, you were going to set your workspace to your working folder. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, go ahead and just maybe ask it in different wording or something, and we can figure all that out. So this is what I like to do when I'm creating projects. Is I like to create multiple folders here in my workspace that are assemblies, parts, and then drawings. This is just for Inventor. So this all falls within my workspace. If I go up one folder from here, this is where the project file is going to lie. So assemblies, drawings, and parts. So say, for example, I had an assembly in here. This is where I like to keep it, my assemblies folder, open it, and all of the parts for that assembly I save into this parts folder, just to keep everything kind of organized and in one space. So as you can see, it looks in this AVA folder. So I'll go ahead and change my project real quick to this Ember project. And this is one of my demo projects that I use. If I have this project open and I hit the Open tab, it's going to go into this data folder, which is what the data folder for my Ember project is called. And all of this is here. So it's going to default to this folder if I'm using that project. So it's just a way to make sure that all of your stuff stays where it should be, and you're not like saving files for this AVA project, maybe in a different one. Definitely good to keep track of that.
And to touch a little bit more on that, for Chi, or sorry if I mispronounced your name, but those folders are both local files, and it's just the workspaces are different, and it's just changing the default location that it's going to look for. Just to touch more on your question, they're similar in that respect, but workspace changes the default location.
Yeah, it just changes the default location where your stuff is located. That doesn't necessarily have to be local even. If you wanted to save on a network drive, that's fine too. So here's a new thing that I figured I think this is new for 2017. So this is usually unchecked. Over here in your projects dialog, say for example you wanted to look for all of this stuff. If you have this AVA project open, actually I'll use my Ember project because there's actually stuff in here. So I'll set that to the active project. Within this workspace, if I click this underlined section here, what it'll do is it'll prompt me to open a file within this workspace. So I can open a file, any file, throughout there, and then all of these libraries, say I wanted to go to them, even though they have nothing in them. If you highlight, because these are underlined, it says that they're linked to something. Something really cool that myself and when I was working on this with Jorge, not Jose, earlier this week, I mentioned to him that I found this thing when 2017 started, and he was actually really excited and figured we'd show this to everybody. So there's this checkbox here. This is open shortcuts using Windows Explorer. And it's kind of like, it is as it sounds. Open the shortcut using Windows Explorer. I'm going to go ahead and open this workspace shortcut again, and now it's not going to give me an open dialog box. It's actually going to open my Windows Explorer, File Explorer, and open this folder on my machine. Say, for example, I wanted to look at this folder, grab some stuff, copy it over, move it somewhere else. Maybe I wanted to make sure that this was even the right project file that I wanted. It's really cool. I like using this feature a lot when I need to copy and paste a bunch of files, or if I need to find something without having to copy this, paste it into my Explorer. Definitely not fun sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and open one of these files here from my workspace. I'm just going to open this this threaded insert. So I have this file open right now. In regards to your project files, if you go ahead and do a file save as on this guy, it's going to prompt you to save it within your workspace. And this workspace is going to default to whatever your workspace is set as on your local project file. Sometimes people are like, well, I'm saving my project and it's trying to save somewhere where I don't want it to. Maybe your project file is set up wrong. Sometimes, say for example, I went to go save this thing on my desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's going to actually bark at me. I'm going to save this guy on my desktop, and I'm just going to make this a test file. No. Oh, that's a test folder. I have a test folder. Let's go ahead and name this something else instead. I'm just going to name this AVA test. test. Now I'm going to save this down. It's going to say, the selected location is not in the active project. Do you wish to continue the save? This is an error message, not necessarily an error message, but a prompt that a lot of our customers come to us and are like, what does this even mean? Am I supposed to do this? Am I doing something wrong? Yes and no. They definitely take it with a grain of salt. If you want to save this part file to your desktop, say for example, you just want to find it easier, you're going to email this to somebody and you just don't want to dig through all your folders to do it, sure, you can save it here. What's going to happen is when you open your project again, you're not going to be able to find this file. It's going to be located on your desktop. You're going to have to go from out of the workspace and kind of search everything through your computer to find it because it's not within that project. When you open a file, when you go to click the Open dialog, it searches only files within the active project and everything underneath that folder. If that's not clear, let me know. I can re-explain that. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to save. This is going to be outside of my project. So say, for example, I wanted to open a file, and I wanted to find this AVA test file. It's like, where is it? This is all alphabetical, and it's definitely not here. So sometimes our customer is like, oh, well, I saved this, and I can't find it. Well, sometimes it's not in your workspace, and that's if you saved it out of your workspace. If I went to my desktop, it's going to be here. Hopefully, it's right there. With all my other files that have great names like test, 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 test. Anyways, that's that. So definitely food for thought and best practices. Make sure you save all of your workspace, or make sure you save all of single project stuff in one folder. Sometimes customers, I run into this a lot, where they don't necessarily want to use a different project file for each different project. It's definitely different for each scenario. Sometimes you have someone who, say for example, they use a lot of the same part over and over again. They don't necessarily use a library. You can use one project file. Say for example, your templates don't change all the time. Use a project file and kind of organize it however you want it underneath that. And that's fine for some people. When some people, they have to change their templates over and over again. Say for example, for like title blocks in your drawings and other things like that, it's definitely a good idea to set a new project file and kind of keep all of that isolated from your other things, just so nothing gets kind of confused, you don't get jumbled. You're like, oh, does this assembly belong with my file for XYZ, or does it belong with my file for ABC? Definitely helps you maintain sanity sometimes, for sure. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you another error message that a lot of people get. Just to go over a few things. I'm going to go ahead and jump back into Home. What was this? Okay, cool. I'll jump back into Home, and I'm going to go ahead and make another project, right, for my Vault project. I'm going to go to Project, and I'm going to hit New. I'm going to make a new Vault project, not a single user project. Sure, I'll make it just all the standard stuff. Vault test. And we won't send any of this over. We don't really need to. And yes, I want to create this path. So sometimes you get this. The active project cannot be changed while Inventor files are open. It's really important. When you have Inventor files open, you cannot change your project file because you have a current project open anyway. So they're not going to let you have two. So it created the file, but it's not letting me change to this file. So sometimes it's like, oh, I created a project file, but I can't find it. It's like, well, it's there, and you just need to close out all of your stuff. And you can freely change your project file to your new Vault test project. So let's go back into the project editor down here, and we'll just real quick with the options, or not options, folder options for these defaults. So there's a way that this gets overridden. It's really it took me a while to understand it at first.
Nigel?
Yeah.
Sorry. Frank said we're going a little too fast. He asked if we click the Vault project or a new single user project. For this example, we clicked the Vault project.
Yeah.
Just to go the other way instead of using a new single user project. There's no specific reason we chose it at this point for now, but you can go. It'll give you the same error whether you create a new single user project or a new Vault project.
Yeah, it'll give you the same prompt whether or not you click Vault or single. If you already have a file open, it's going to bark at you. So this is what I did. I created a new Vault project. and that's my Vault test project here. So this design data folder is set to whatever the default is. Templates folder is set to default, and content center files are set to default. Let's go ahead. So this, sometimes people are like, oh, what is the default folder? Well, it's set by something else. It's not set by this. The default folder is set in your application options under file. So application options. So tools, just go slowly here. Tools, application options, and then go into the files tab. And this is where you set your default for your design data, which is your styles pretty much, your content center, which is wherever you want this set, and then some other things with templates and stuff. So sometimes people have, say, networked content center files, and this is where the default would be set. So this is where all of those defaults come from. If you're wondering why it says default, like what does that even mean? Well, it comes from here. Say, for example, your project file says default, and this here says some network location, not this. It's going to go to that network location instead of this, obviously.
And something you might also be useful, if you just want to know where they're located, you don't want to change them or anything, if you hover over that default, it'll actually show you the file path where it's looking.
Right there.
It just pops up there if you're just looking for the actual files.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I don't even know what network drive this is on or whatever. It's kind of set to here. If you override this, say, for example, I set my design data to look in, let's just say desktop. I don't know why, but sure, my design data folder is on my desktop. If I set this to desktop, it's going to look for my design data, which is the styles, and mainly styles, pretty much, on my desktop. It's not going to look at the default folder anymore. So this overrides anything in that default folder, in the application options. So any change here is going to take precedence over any change on the application option side of things. So I'm just going to go back to the default folder so I don't lose all my stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into this. We're going to jump into, that's fine, I'm going to save my project. And just another thing real quick, if you want to configure Content Center, that's all here within your project file location. You can pick which Content Centers you want loaded. Say, for example, you don't need any of this, or you only need ANSI. You can uncheck all of the others and kind of use whichever ones you want for this particular project. Say, for example, you have a project you're working on with people in Japan and you want to use their standards. Maybe you just want to have the GIS one on, and that's it. Just an example. So we'll jump into this real quick. We're going to go into our Vault tab. We're logged in. We're going to open a file from Vault. Sometimes people get this error message. I'm just going over all the error messages just so when this happens to you, you kind of know what to do. The active project's workspace is not mapped to a path in the Vault. In order to proceed, the workspace must be mapped. Essentially, this is telling you need to map your workspaces so you can open stuff within Vault so it knows where to look for things. Down here is your map folders option. You're going to hit map folders, your project group folder. Jose, if you want to explain this, usually I just send it to designs. This is just where your project file looks for stuff.
Yeah, so it's where it's going to locate your project file, and it's also where that, like we spoke earlier, where it's going to look by default for those files. So we usually set it to designs, and then the next one that we have is content center files, which if you're keeping them on the Vault, if you're using Vault, you'll have content center files.
Yep, and if you don't, then you can map this to wherever you really need to go. Or it might not even tell you that this needs to be mapped. So we're going to go, okay, we've mapped all of our folders, we've opened our Vault project, and now we can open stuff from Vault. Let's open my test part, which is very complex. Files are not checked out, I'll check that out, that's fine. And yes. Ta-da, here's my test part. Slowly opening here. There we go. And so this is how you kind of work with your Vault and the project file in Vault. Your workspace for Vault is going to be a little bit different. Your workspace is your working folder for Vault. Mm-hmm. So I think we've covered most of it. Jose, do you know if I've missed anything here? If anyone has any questions that I can answer real quick.
One thing we might want to elaborate more is on the workspace in the Vault. it uses your working folder from the vault by default.
Yep.
And
if you need help setting that up, that's another AVA's worth of stuff.
Yeah.
Or if you have any questions about that, please let us know. We'll have all of our contact information up here at the end. And if you're having problems with Vault projects, it's a little bit more involved than necessarily your single user project, especially if you want to share this with a ton of people. That was the one thing I forgot. All right. Sharing your project with your colleagues. So, when you want to share a project with colleagues, say for example you're not using Vault, but you want to share this project file just so everyone maintains the same orientation, I guess, configuration of your Inventor. Say for example I wanted everyone on this. You can share this project file. What you do is, for the most part, what I do, if I were going to do this with a bunch of my colleagues, is I would put this project file on a network location where everyone can reach it. At that point, I would set the workspace to either I would set the workspace on each person's machine to either some location on their machine, on their local drive, if that's what you wanted, or a location in a network drive so you guys can share data. And that's if you're not using Vault. If you are using Vault, it is kind of important that you and your entire team are all using the same project file. And for Vault users, you're going to want to use a single project file for all of your projects. It works a little bit differently for Vault users. If you want to talk about your specific configuration separately with us, we're more than happy to schedule some time to talk about that. But one project file for Vault for everything, and Inventor, you can either have one project file for everything or one project file for each project.
And one thing you want to remember when sharing project files is if you don't want your users to change the libraries or change any of the styles, make sure that it's in the read-only mode or option. That way, if they do end up changing it or trying to change it by accident, it'll give them an error.
Whether they want to change it maliciously or on accident,
yeah,
it won't let them. Or you can just you can set it as hidden in the folder, and that's another way to do it. There is one reason I could see you having two vaulted projects, and that would be for the admin to have a second Vault project that they can edit freely. But for the most part, you want to have your entire organization on one single project if you're using Vault, because then you can just start messing with Vault files, and you're going to have inconsistencies. That's definitely not good. So with that, I think we've gone over everything that I needed to go over. But it looks like we got a couple of questions here. I'll jump back in the PowerPoint real quick. So in summary, project files help you organize and access all files that are associated with a particular design job. We went over single user projects and Vault projects. If you're still confused, please let us know. We can kind of spend some time one-on-one with you and figure out where that confusion is. And 3, maintain a single environment with you and your colleagues, whether or not that's everyone sharing a single user project, or if you're using Vault already, to maintain a single environment by using one project file for everything. We're going to jump into Q&A here. Jose, do we have anything that's come in so far?
Yeah, so we have one from Brian. Once a project is saved in a location, what is the best practice to move the project to another location at a later date?
So go ahead, Jose, if you want.
Actually, for this one, I wanted to get a little more clarification as to why you would move the project. Yeah. Usually, you don't want to move the project because your files will be set to a certain location, and then you would have to move the files and the project at the same time. If you're starting to use a new project or want to create a new project, but you're using some of the same files, and that's why you want to move the project over, we would recommend creating a new project and then including your old project file so that it finds those files.
Yeah, so I'll show that real quick. So if you want to include another project, that's here in your project editor, included file. Say, for example, not a good example because that's a Vault project. Say this Ember project, say for example I wanted to add my default project to this. You can add your included file, edit, and then you can select, say I want to select my default project. If you do this and add this file here, when it's looking in your workspace, it's also going to look here, and its corresponding stuff for files. So if you need to move a project over, say for example, like your drive failed or something, you're going to need to remap a bunch of stuff. If you need some help with that, just let us know, and we can kind of guide you through that. Because obviously, this file directory might not be C users, public, et cetera, anymore. And then you're going to have some like failed connections to stuff.
Or search paths.
Yep. Do we have any other questions here? It looks like we've got a couple more. This question hasn't come up very often since then, so at least for a while. Let's see. Joe here says that he missed the first half of the presentation, wants to watch it again, or wants to watch it. Period. Yeah. So Joe, you can go to, and anyone else who wants to, you can go to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/KETIV Technologies. You can find all of our recordings from previous AVAs and this one as well. They'll all be there. This one should be there sometime this afternoon or tomorrow.
And Donovan is asking if the old versions folder, if that holds one old version, and it's something that Nigel touched on really quickly, but in the old versions folder you can actually set, on your project file, you can actually set what amount of versions you want to keep. Yeah.
Yep. So say for example, something's going up with your computer and you keep losing data for some reason. Maybe you want to set that number to 2, maybe 3. I don't suggest keeping it very many more than that, because then you're going to start using your hard drive space really fast, unless you've got like unlimited storage space, which would be really nice. In that case, maybe you want to use Vault.
Yeah.
If you want some version control, and you want to maintain all of those older versions of your files. Let's see. Now I'll go ahead and I'll just show that real quick, just in case you missed it. It's really quick. Excuse me. This options dialog down here is going to tell you how many old versions you want to keep, and it's going to tell you to write a variable in this box, which equals the number that you want to keep. If you don't want to keep them all, type -1, and even though that makes no sense, you can type that in, and it'll keep everything.
And sorry, there's a second part to Donovan's question.
Yep.
If you want to back up a version, can you use it to back it up? We're talking again about the old version, and that old version is actually not your current one. So I don't think I would recommend using it to back up, because you'll be one edit back, so one session back. So if you want to back up a file, I would recommend using the current one.
Or if you want to back up files in general, use Vault. For those of you who have product design suites or product design collections now, you do have Vault Basics. So if you want to use it to kind of maintain all of your file structure that way and kind of keep all your files in a centralized location, feel free to do so. If you have any questions about that, let us know, and we can kind of guide you through the process in regards to what Vault does versus your local folder, some of its advantages, and other things like that. So it looks like we've got a couple more in here, Jose. I can't read those from here, so if you want.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at here. There's some from, let's take a look here. From Kazu is asking, can you set the default project file? Sometimes our Vault project switches from Vault to default on its own. And in some of those cases, I believe it will happen if the file that you're opening is in the workspace of the default project file.
Yeah, so it'll change. Say, for example, you don't have Inventor open yet. You just have your Windows open, and you go to your Windows Explorer, which is like your File Explorer, and you open something. Say, for example, you open something that's not in your workspace. It's going to default to whatever folder or whatever project file that folder or that file belongs to, if that makes sense. And vice versa with Vault stuff. It's going to go to that Vault project file. Say, for example, you open something within your Vault working folder.
And then we have a question here from Raymond. Do the project folders still need to maintain the same folder name in the file directory? folder name and a project name, parts linked to C drive new parts or C drive old parts.
Project folders still need to maintain the same folder name in the file directory. Folder name and project name. Parts links to C new parts or C old parts. I think I need to see this. Raymond, if you wanna email us, or we could follow up with you to look at that specifically, and then we can kind of get clarification. I'm still a little confused.
Yeah, as to the wording.
Yeah, definitely.
And the same thing goes to Frank about whether it's best for you to use a vault or a single user project. We can go over exactly how it's set up and go with the best.
If you're using Vault,
you want to use a Vault.
You want to use a Vault project. If you don't have Vault, don't use a Vault project.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple. That's kind of like the two very distinct buckets. Vault, not Vault. And to answer that question, Frank, Vault has more features than single user. No, they're pretty much exactly the same. Vault projects per se have about the same control level as single user project. The project editor has all of the same buttons, pretty much. In regards to Vault versus like local file store, it's a different story. It has more features in regards to like saving your files, saving your database over, and all of that stuff. If you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out to us, and we can answer any and all questions about that. This is our Vault, one of our Vault Care guys, anyways, and so he can answer all those questions for you. Let's see what else we have here. So yeah, Raymond, if you want us to follow up with you, just let us know in the survey or let us know in this questions box, and we can kind of look at your question a little more deeply. As to the wording, it's kind of a little confusing to me for sure. Before we end, I want to let you all know that we do have an event for those in, I guess, the Pacific Northwest, or even if you want to travel to the Pacific Northwest. We have an event that looks like here next week on the 11th, which is next Friday. And I will get that link for you here shortly. Let me go ahead and type this into my Google. Or I guess that's too long to type. I'm just going to copy and paste it from my Slack. There we go. So we have this event next week, next Friday, at the Lake Oswego offices for Autodesk. And it's our Vault Care 101 workshop. So it looks like I do recognize some people in this chat right now who were at our Vault Care 101 workshop here in Brea offices last week. In the Brea offices last week. Oh my gosh, I'm missing words in my sentence. And definitely took advantage of learning how to maintain your Vault, learning how to best practices in regards to maintaining it, how to not lose your data, because the last thing we want anyone to do is lose all your data and not be able to recover it. And even if you are able to recover it, sometimes it takes up to 10 days to do so. I've definitely seen that happen before. And then in regards to Vault Professional versus Vault Basic, we're going to go over some of those as well. So you'll see Jorge and Conor there next week. If you want to sign up, I'll go ahead and leave this link in the chat box for those who are in the Pacific Northwest or maybe you want to travel there. And then you can fill out this form yourself. And if you have any questions, just let us know. So I'm going to put this in the chat box real quick. Yep, and yeah, I just wanted to go over a couple of the error messages that we get pretty commonly with project files and how they're not set up properly or how you're not using the right one. Definitely takes care of hopefully some of those issues for you if you see them in the future. A lot of times, I don't know if Jose sees this, I can't speak for him, but for myself, I've seen a couple of people use even vaulted customers. Each person is using a different project file, and that could get a little dangerous. Yeah. If everyone's using a different one, you're not necessarily going to be using the same file mapping for everything, and then you can break stuff. That's not what you want to do. Yeah. So with that, I think we'll end this here. Just to remind you, next week we got a really special AVA with we're going to have a guest from Autodesk talking about some Inventor updates. So if you are interested in learning about some new stuff in Inventor, please come next week at 10, and we'll we'll all be here. Maybe Jose won't, but I will. So with that, I'd like to thank you, Jose, for being here today, taking the time. I'd like to give a shout out to Jorge Fernandez. His son broke his arm yesterday. He was actually supposed to be the one sitting here. So shout out to his son. Get better soon, man. And I think that's it for today. So I have no sweet movie quotes for you this week, but who are you going to call?
Ghostbusters.